The Krelvani Empire had ruled over 300 star systems for 10,000 years. Their massive warships, each the size of small moons, patrolled the galaxy with absolute authority. No species dared challenge them. Their technology was beyond anything most civilizations could dream of achieving. Energy shields that could withstand the force of exploding stars. Weapons that could crack planets like eggs. Faster-than-light engines that could cross the galaxy in mere days. Ambassador Zeleth stood on the bridge of the Imperial flagship, his four arms clasped behind his elongated torso. His species, the Krelvani, had evolved on a high-gravity world, making them naturally strong and resilient. Their gray, scaled skin could deflect most projectile weapons, and their telepathic abilities allowed them to coordinate perfectly in battle. They were, quite simply, the apex predators of the galaxy. Another successful collection, Ambassador, his aide reported, approaching with careful steps. Even among their own kind, lower-ranked Krelvani showed proper deference to their superiors. "How many this time?" Zeleth asked, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the ship's hull. 47 younglings from various species. The quota for this sector has been met. The Krelvani had long ago instituted a tribute system. Each conquered world had to provide a certain number of their young to serve the Empire. Some became soldiers, others workers, and the most intelligent were inducted into the scientific corps. It was, Zeleth believed, a fair system. The Empire provided protection and technology in exchange for service. Those who refused faced annihilation. And the new species, the ones who call themselves humans? The aide's tentacles twitched nervously. They resisted Ambassador. "We were forced to take their tribute by force." Zeleth turned, all 6 of his eyes focusing on the subordinate. Resisted? They are a Type 1 civilization. They've barely left their home system. How could they possibly resist? They have primitive projectile weapons and nuclear devices. Nothing that could penetrate our shields, of course, but they fought with unexpected ferocity. We had to stun their entire military installation to collect the required younglings. The Ambassador made a dismissive gesture. "No matter. They'll learn, as all species do, that resistance is futile. Where are the human younglings now?" "In the holding bay with the others. Though, there's been an incident." Zeleth's scales shifted color, showing his irritation. "What kind of incident?" "One of the human adults somehow survived the stun field. He eliminated 6 of our warriors before we could subdue him. He's in containment now." This was unusual. No species had ever shown immunity to their stun technology. Zeleth decided to investigate personally. He made his way through the ship's corridors, each one large enough to accommodate beings from a dozen different worlds. The Krelvani believed in efficiency, and their ships reflected this. Everything was functional, utilitarian, designed for maximum effectiveness. The containment area was in the ship's lower levels. As Zeleth approached, he could hear sounds of struggle. Through the transparent aluminum viewing port, he saw something that made him pause. The human was smaller than he'd expected, no more than 2 meters tall, with only 2 arms and 2 eyes. Its skin was soft, without scales or natural armor. By all rights, it should have been one of the weakest species they'd encountered. Yet 6 of his elite warriors lay unconscious around the cell, their armor cracked and weapons scattered. The human was pacing like a caged predator, its movements fluid and controlled. When it noticed Zeleth, it stopped and stared directly at him. There was something in those eyes that the Ambassador had never seen before in a lesser species. Not fear, not submission, something else entirely. "I want to speak to whoever's in charge," the human said. The translation matrix converted the words, but something in the tone came through regardless. "I am Ambassador Zeleth of the Krelvani Empire. You are in no position to make demands, primitive." The human's face did something strange. Later, Zeleth would learn this was called a smile, but in that moment, it looked more like a predator baring its teeth. "My name is Marcus Rodriguez, Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy SEALs. And you took my daughter. Your offspring has been selected for service to the Empire. It is an honor." "Honor." The human's voice was quiet, controlled. Somehow, that was more unsettling than shouting would have been. You took a 7-year-old girl. My little Sophie. You have no idea what you just done. Zelith activated the cell's pain inducers. Electricity coursed through the walls, enough to bring most species to their knees in agony. The human gritted its teeth and remained standing. Impressive, Zelith admitted, but ultimately meaningless. Your world has been added to the Empire. Your species will serve, as all others do. Let me explain something to you, Marcus said, still fighting through the pain. I've spent my entire adult life training for impossible situations. I've operated in every environment my planet has to offer. I've been shot, stabbed, burned, frozen, and drowned. I've survived things that would kill most humans. And all of that training, all of that experience has led to this moment. Empty boast from a defeated species. You think you've won because you have big ships and fancy technology. But you made one critical error. You took our children. And there's something you need to understand about humans, especially human parents. We're capable of things you can't imagine when our children are threatened. The pain inducers shut off automatically after their preset duration. Marcus remained standing, his gaze never leaving Zelith's. Your empire is dead, Marcus said quietly. You just don't know it yet. Zelith turned to his aide. Increase security on this one, and prepare the younglings for transport to the training facilities. As he walked away, Zelith dismissed the humans' words. They'd heard similar threats from countless species over the millennia. None had ever amounted to anything. The Krelvani Empire was eternal, unchangeable, undefeatable. He couldn't have been more wrong. The holding bay where the younglings were kept was a massive space, designed to accommodate beings of various sizes and environmental needs. Force fields separated different atmospheric zones, ensuring each species could breathe comfortably. The Krelvani prided themselves on keeping their tributes in good health. Dead servants were useless, after all. Sophie Rodriguez sat in the section designated for oxygen breathers, her small form huddled with the other human children. At 7 years old, she was one of the youngest taken. Her dark hair was pulled back in the same ponytail her father had fixed for her that morning, before the ships came. Before everything changed. I want my daddy, a smaller boy whimpered beside her. Sophie put her arm around him. It's okay, Michael. Our parents will come for us. My dad promised he'd always protect me. He never breaks his promises. The other children, from various species, made their own sounds of distress. Some had multiple eyes that leaked fluorescent tears. Others had fur that stood on end with fear. But fear was universal, crossing all species barriers. A Vraxian youngling, its blue scales still soft with youth, moved closer to Sophie. My parent unit told stories of species that fought back against the Empire. They all failed. My dad is different, Sophie insisted, with the absolute certainty that only a child could have in their parent. He's a Navy SEAL. He protects people. It's what he does. Back on Earth, the aftermath of the Krelvani raid was spurring humanity to action in ways the Empire couldn't have predicted. The attack had been surgical, precise, targeting a military school where the children of service members attended. 47 children taken in less than 10 minutes. The base's defenses, Earth's most advanced, had been useless against the alien technology. But they'd made one mistake. They'd left survivors, parents who'd seen their children taken. And among those parents were some of the most dangerous humans on the planet. Admiral Sarah Chun stood before the assembled Joint Chiefs, her face a mask of controlled fury. Satellitely imagery shows their ship is still in the solar system, moving at sublight speeds. We have a window, but it's closing fast. What assets do we have that could possibly reach them? General Thompson asked. Nothing conventional, but we've been working on something. Project Prometheus. The room fell silent. Prometheus was their most classified project, an attempt to reverse engineer the alien technology from the Roswell crash decades ago. Most thought it was a fool's errand, science fiction at best. It's not ready, the Secretary of Defense protested. We haven't even had a successful test flight. Then, we'll test it in combat, Chen replied. We have 17 parents who are special operations qualified volunteers. They know it's likely a one-way trip. This is insane. We're talking about sending a prototype spacecraft with an untested FTL drive after a ship that could destroy our entire planet. They took our children. The words hung in the air like a challenge. If we don't act now, they'll be gone forever. Sold into slavery or worse. Is that what we tell the parents? That we didn't even try? The vote was unanimous. Marcus Rodriguez felt the drugs wearing off slowly. The Kralvani had finally used some kind of sedative gas to knock him out after he'd broken through the first containment cell. He kept his breathing steady, his eyes closed, listening to his surroundings. Multiple heartbeats, different rhythms suggesting different species. The hum of energy shields, distant footsteps on metal decking. He was in a different cell now, likely more secure than the last. I know you're awake, human. Marcus opened his eyes. A different Kralvani stood outside his cell, this one wearing what looked like scientific equipment rather than military gear. Iamdurvik's hi. I've been studying your species since we made first contact. You're fascinating creatures. So fragile, yet so persistent. Where's my daughter? Safe. As safe as any tribute to the Empire can be. She'll be tested, evaluated, assigned to a suitable role. If she's intelligent, she might become a scientist. If she's strong, a soldier. The Empire uses all resources efficiently. She's 7 years old. Age is irrelevant. The younger they are, the easier they adapt to service. The scientist activated a holographic display. Your species interests me particularly. You have no natural weapons. No automat. You're not particularly strong or fast by galactic standards. Yet you've somehow become the dominant species on your planet. How? Marcus tested his restraints subtly. Energy shackles, unbreakable by physical force. But there are always weaknesses. His SEAL training had taught him that every system had a flaw. We're adaptable, he answered, keeping the alien talking while he analyzed the situation. We're persistence hunters. Our ancestors would chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We don't give up. Interesting. And this SEAL designation you mentioned, what does it mean? Sea, air, and land. We're trained to operate in any environment, to complete the mission no matter the odds. And what is your mission now? Marcus looked directly at the scientist. To get my daughter back, and to make sure your empire never threatens another human child again. The scientist's scales shifted to what Marcus was beginning to recognize as amusement. Bold words from a single human in captivity. I'm not alone. That's something else about humans you should understand. Threaten one of us, you might have a problem. Threaten our children, and you've united our entire species against you. Back on Earth, Project Prometheus was being rushed to completion. The ship itself was a hodgepodge of human engineering and barely understood alien technology. It looked like someone had welded a submarine to a flying saucer and hoped for the best. But it was humanity's only shot. Chief Rebecca Martinez supervised the weapons loading. They couldn't match the Empire's energy weapons, but humans had gotten very good at making things explode over their history. The Prometheus carried humanity's most devastating weapons, modified for space combat. Nuclear mines are loaded, her lieutenant reported. Kinetic kill vehicles are locked in their tubes. We've even managed to mount those experimental railguns. It won't be enough against their shields, Martinez said. Not in a straight fight. Then, it's a good thing SEALs don't fight fair, Chief, a voice said behind her. She turned to see Lieutenant Commander James Wallace, Marcus Rodriguez's swim buddy from BUD/S training. The two had been like brothers for 20 years. You sure about this, Jim? It's a prototype ship going up against technology we don't understand. They have Marcus and Sophie. That's all I need to know. He paused. Besides, you know what we say in the teams. The only easy day was yesterday, Martinez finished. It was the SEAL motto, and it had never felt more appropriate. The Prometheus crew was small by necessity. 17 operators, each a parent of taken child, each bringing their own specialized skills. Navy SEALs, Delta Force, SAS, Spetsnaz, the normal rivalries between units forgotten in the face of a common enemy. Captain Lisa Park, former Air Force test pilot, and mother of 8-year-old Tommy, took the commander's seat. Pre-flight check. Reactor online. FTL drive shows green across the board. Weapons hot. We're as ready as we'll ever be, her co-pilot reported. This is ground control. Prometheus, you're cleared for launch. Godspeed and bring our children home. The ship rose on pillars of fire, humanity's desperate gambit against an empire that had ruled the stars for millennia. The Krelvani had made the classic mistake of any bully. They'd assumed that because someone was weaker, they were helpless. They were about to learn otherwise. On the Krelvani flagship, Zelith received a report that made his scales shift to show confusion. A ship is following us. From Earth. Yes, Ambassador. It appears to be a crude amalgamation of technologies. Our analysts believe they've attempted to reverse engineer an FTL drive. Attempted? Zelith laughed. A sound like grinding stone. Show me this ship. The holographic display showed the Prometheus. To Krelvani eyes, it looked like a joke. Welded metal plates instead of seamless hull construction. Primitive chemical thrusters alongside what might charitably be called a FTL drive. Weapons that belonged in a museum. They're hailing us, Ambassador. This should be amusing. Put them through. Captain Park's face appeared on the display. Human faces were still difficult for Zelith to read, but he thought he detected determination. Krelvani vessel. This is Captain Lisa Park of the Earth ship Prometheus. You have illegally kidnapped 47 human children. Return them immediately or face the consequences. The bridge crew's laughter echoed through the ship. A tiny, primitive vessel threatening the flagship of the Krelvani Empire? It was the height of absurdity. Captain Park, Zelith replied, your bravery is admirable but misguided. Your ship couldn't scratch our shields if you fired every weapon you have. Return to your world. Accept your place in the Empire. Your children will be well cared for in their service. Last chance, Ambassador. Return our children. Or what? Park's expression didn't change. Or we'll take them back. And you'll learn why humanity has survived everything our planet could throw at us. She cut the communication. The Prometheus dove toward the Krelvani flagship like a hawk descending on prey. Inside the cramped bridge, Captain Lisa Park gripped her controls with white knuckles. The massive alien vessel grew larger in their view screen with each passing second, its hull a seamless expanse of some unknown metal that seemed to drink in light. Enemy weapons charging, her tactical officer announced. Energy readings are off the scale. Evasive pattern alpha. Let's see if their targeting systems can keep up with human unpredictability, Park ordered. The Prometheus began a series of maneuvers that would have been impossible for any conventional spacecraft. The alien technology they'd integrated didn't just allow for faster-than-light travel. It somehow negated inertia. They could pull turns that should have liquefied the crew, stop on a dime, and accelerate in ways that violated everything humans thought they knew about physics. Lieutenant Commander Wallace monitored the approach from his station. Their weapons are having trouble locking on. Looks like they're not used to targets this small moving this erratically. Small and crazy. Story of my life, Park muttered. She thought of her son Tommy, somewhere on that massive ship. Weapons range in 30 seconds. The first Krelvani energy beam lanced out, a brilliant purple lance of destruction that could have vaporized a city. It missed the Prometheus by meters as Park threw the ship into a spiraling dive that made several crew members reach for their sick bags. Return fire. Everything we've got. The human ship erupted with violence. Nuclear-tipped missiles streamed from launch tubes. Railguns fired tungsten rods at significant fractions of the speed of light. Laser systems, primitive by galactic standards but still carrying enough energy to be noticed, painted the enemy hull. On the Krelvani bridge, Zelith watched with amusement as the human weapons impacted his shields. Explosions bloomed harmlessly against the energy barriers, unable to even strain the defensive systems. They're like insects throwing pebbles at a tank, his weapons officer scoffed. Should I intensify our fire? No, let them exhaust their ammunition. I want them alive for study. How a species this primitive managed to build even a crude FTL drive is worth investigating. But back in the detention area, something else was happening. Marcus Rodriguez had noticed something interesting about his cell. The energy shackles that held him were incredibly sophisticated, responding to any physical force with an equal and opposite reaction. Pull against them, and they pulled back harder. Strike them, and they absorbed the impact. But Marcus had spent years studying various forms of martial arts, and one principle came to mind. Sometimes the way to defeat strength was not with greater strength, but with its absence. He began to slowly, gradually relax every muscle in his body, using meditation techniques learned from a decade of combat stress. The shackles, designed to respond to resistance, began to loosen incrementally. Their programming couldn't quite compensate for a complete lack of tension. It would take time, but Marcus had learned patience in places like Afghanistan and Syria, waiting motionless for hours for the perfect shot. In the younglings' holding area, Sophie Rodriguez was organizing the children with a maturity beyond her 7 years. Her father had always taught her that in any crisis, the first thing to do was assess the situation and resources. "Okay, everyone," she said, standing on a crate so the other children could see her. "My dad says that when you're in trouble, you need to know 3 things: where you are, what you have, and where you need to go." A young boy from Japan raised his hand. "We're on an alien spaceship. We have nothing, and we need to go home." "This is hopeless." "No, it's not," Sophie insisted. "Look around. We have each other, and we have things they don't expect." "Like what?" the Vraxian youngling asked, its translator rendering its clicks and whistles into English. Sophie smiled, the same expression her father had given to Krelvani. "They think we're just kids. They're not watching us as carefully as they would adults. That's an advantage. Plus, some of us have skills. Kenji, your mom said you're really good with computers, right?" The Japanese boy nodded slowly. "But these are alien computers. Still computers. And, Maria, you told me your big brother taught you to pick locks." "These are energy fields, not regular locks," the girl protested. "But they're still locks. They have to have some way to open them. We just need to figure out how." The children began to talk among themselves, sharing what skills they had. It turned out that military brats, the children of special forces operators and intelligence officers, picked up some interesting knowledge. One knew basic first aid. Another had memorized the ship's patrol patterns just from watching. A third noticed that the force fields flickered slightly every hour on the hour, possibly some kind of system refresh. Meanwhile, the Prometheus continued its desperate attack run. They'd expended half their ammunition to no visible effect, but Captain Park had never expected conventional weapons to work. They were a distraction, nothing more. "Wallace, are your people ready?" "Boarding party standing by. Just get us close enough." This was the real plan. Humans might not have the technology to defeat the Krelvani shields, but they'd gotten very good over the centuries at asymmetrical warfare. If you couldn't beat an enemy's strengths, you found their weaknesses and exploited them ruthlessly. "Jenkins, prepare the surprise package," Park ordered. Deep in the Prometheus's hold, Sergeant Maria Jenkins activated what looked like a standard escape pod. Inside, however, was humanity's real weapon. Not explosives or energy beams, but something far more dangerous: human ingenuity and determination. The escape pod was actually a specialized infiltration vehicle, designed to look like debris. It contained no weapons, no technology that would register on enemy scanners. Just 3 operators in specialized suits, and something the science team had cobbled together based on their analysis of Krelvani technology. The Prometheus suddenly shuddered and began venting atmosphere, looking for all the world like it had taken critical damage. The ship spiraled away from the Krelvani flagship, leaving behind what appeared to be debris from the impact. "They're retreating," the Krelvani weapons officer reported. "The primitive ship has been damaged. Should we pursue?" "No need," Zeleth said dismissively. "They'll either die in space or limp back to their world with stories of their failure. Begin scanning the debris. There might be useful technology to salvage." Among the floating pieces of hull, plating, and vented atmosphere, 3 small objects drifted toward the flagship. They looked like nothing more than twisted metal, victims of explosive decompression. The Krelvani's sensors, designed to detect energy signatures and technology, found nothing of interest. But inside those pieces of debris, 3 humans waited with the patience their species had learned while persistence hunting on the African savanna. Navy SEAL Chief Petty Officer Diana Reeves checked her chronometer. According to their intelligence, the Krelvani shields had a brief fluctuation every time they transitioned from combat mode back to standard operation. A window of less than a second where the harmonics weren't quite synchronized. "Stand by," she whispered intercom 3 to a mark. The 3 pieces of debris suddenly burst apart, revealing the suited humans inside. They fired grappling cables in the split second the shields fluctuated, the magnetic anchors finding purchase on the alien hull. Before the shields could re-establish, they were inside the barrier. "We're in," Reeves reported. "Beginning hull breach." The devices they carried weren't weapons in any conventional sense. They were mining charges designed to create very small, very precise holes. Nothing that would trigger the ship's combat alerts, but large enough for what came next. Back on the Prometheus, Park allowed herself a small smile. Phase 1 complete. Now we wait. "Wait for what?" her co-pilot asked. "For them to learn why you never, ever take a human's child." Inside the Krelvani ship, alarms began to sound in the lower maintenance sections. Small breaches, barely large enough to notice. The automated systems began sealing them, but the humans weren't trying to decompress the ship. They were just trying to get inside. Marcus felt the shackles give a little more. The energy field was weakening, unable to maintain its grip without resistance to push against. He'd been at it for hours now, controlling his breathing, keeping his heart rate steady despite the surge of adrenaline every time he thought of Sophie. Dr. Vexhai returned to check on his prize specimen, and Marcus immediately tensed slightly, giving the shackles something to grip. He couldn't let them know what he was doing. "Remarkable," the scientist said, studying his instruments. "Your neural patterns show you're under extreme stress, yet your physiological responses are almost baseline." "How?" "Training," Marcus replied simply. "This interests me. Your species seems to have an unusual ability to override your biological imperatives. Fear, pain, exhaustion, you can simply choose to ignore them. Not ignore, acknowledge and push through. There's a difference." The scientist's scales shifted to show curiosity. "Show me." He activated the pain inducers again, watching his instruments as electricity coursed through Marcus's body. The human's muscles locked, his teeth clenched, but he remained conscious and alert. "Fascinating. Your pain receptors are firing at levels that would incapacitate most species, yet you remain functional. Is this common among your kind?" "Common enough," Marcus gritted out. "We call it grit. Determination. The ability to endure what must be endured. For what purpose? Why suffer when submission would end the pain?" Marcus looked the alien directly in its 6 eyes. "Because my daughter is counting on me, and I will walk through hell itself to keep her safe." The scientist increased the pain level, genuinely curious about human limits. He was so focused on his readings that he didn't notice the slight fluctuation in the energy shackle's power signature. In the maintenance tunnels of the massive ship, 3 humans moved like ghosts. Their suits, based on captured stealth technology and modified by human engineers who'd spent decades perfecting the art of infiltration, masked their heat signatures and life signs. To the ship's sensors, they were just another piece of equipment. Chief Reeves led the way, her team moving with the fluid precision of operators who'd worked together for years. They'd studied every scrap of information about Krelvani ships, piecing together deck plans from survivor accounts and long-range scans. "Detention level should be 3 decks up," Sergeant Collins whispered. "But we need to disable internal sensors first." They brought something special for that. Humans might not understand alien technology completely, but they understood computers. And more importantly, they understood viruses. The device looked like a simple data pad, but it contained humanity's most insidious creation, a learning algorithm designed to infiltrate any system and create chaos. They found a maintenance terminal, and their tech specialist went to work. The Krelvani would never have imagined someone physically accessing their systems. Their security was designed to stop energy weapons and boarding parties, not 3 humans with determination and a really clever piece of malware. "I'm in," Technical Sergeant Kim reported. "Uploading the package now." The virus began to spread through the ship's systems like wildfire. It didn't try to take control or shut things down. That would have triggered immediate countermeasures. Instead, it did something far more subtle. It introduced random delays. A microsecond here, A half-second there. Commands that should have been instant now took just a moment longer to execute. To the Krelvani crew, it seemed like minor system lag, the kind of thing that happened on any ship this size. Irritating, but not dangerous. They had no idea it was the digital equivalent of sand in the gears, gradually grinding their perfect efficiency to a halt. On the bridge, Zeleth noticed the slight delays in his console responses. Have engineering check the primary computer core. Something seems off. Yes, Ambassador. Though it's probably just Psychtam strain from the combat maneuvers. Another mistake. The Krelvani were so confident in their superiority that they couldn't imagine sabotage from within. After all, no species had ever successfully boarded one of their ships during combat. The human boarding team reached the detention level. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, they could see dozens of cells holding creatures from various worlds. And in the maximum security section, one human male who was doing something very strange with his restraints. That's Rodriguez, Reeves confirmed. Looks like he's working on an escape of his own. Should we help him? Not yet. Let's find the children first. They moved deeper into the detention block, following the signs that their translation software interpreted as tribute holding. The virus was working perfectly, creating just enough confusion in the security systems that their presence went unnoticed. Then they found them. 47 human children, along with younglings from other species, held behind a massive force field. And standing at the front, organizing the others like a tiny general, was Sophie Rodriguez. I knew they'd come, Sophie said quietly when she spotted the suited figures. I told everyone our parents would come. Reeves felt her throat tighten behind her helmet. These kids had been through hell, but they hadn't broken. They'd held on to hope, supported each other, and even now were showing the kind of courage that would make any parent proud. Stand back from the force field, kids. We're getting you out of here. They brought something special for this, too. Not a weapon or an explosive, but a device based on harmonics. The human scientists had figured out that force fields were essentially standing waves of energy. Disrupt the frequency, and the field collapsed. The device hummed to life, emitting a sound that made everyone's teeth ache. The force field flickered, wavered, and then collapsed entirely. Move! Quick and quiet, just like a fire drill, Reeves ordered. The children responded with surprising discipline. Sophie helped the younger ones, making sure no one was left behind. Even the alien younglings followed, recognizing rescue when they saw it. But their escape hadn't gone completely unnoticed. In his cell, Marcus felt the change in the ship's rhythm. Something was happening. The energy shackles fluctuated again, and this time he was ready. He went completely limp, offering absolutely no resistance. The shackles, designed to hold a struggling prisoner, couldn't compensate fast enough. For just a moment, they loosened beyond their safety margin. It was enough. Marcus rolled free, hitting the ground in a combat crouch. His muscles screamed from hours of electrical torture, but pain was just information. He'd deal with it later. Right now, his daughter needed him. The cell door was still locked, but Marcus had noticed something during his hours of observation. The Krelvani relied too heavily on their technology. The door might be made of some impossible alloy and locked by fields beyond human understanding, but it still had hinges. And hinges, no matter how advanced, obeyed the basic laws of physics. He examined the cell, looking for anything he could use. The Krelvani had been thorough, removing anything that could be a weapon. But they'd left the basic furnishings, including what passed for a bed, a slab of the same metal as the hull, extruded from the floor. Marcus smiled grimly. In SEAL training, they'd learned that anything could be a tool if you were creative enough. He began working on the bed, using leverage and his body weight to stress the connection points. On the bridge, alerts finally began appearing that couldn't be ignored. Ambassador, we have a security breach in the detention section. The tribute holding area has been compromised. Zeleth's scales flushed dark purple with rage. Impossible. Check the sensors again. I've checked 3 times, sir. The younglings are gone. And the human prisoner has somehow escaped his cell. For the first time in his long career, Zeleth felt a touch of uncertainty. This wasn't how lesser species behaved. They were supposed to cower, submit, accept their fate. They weren't supposed to infiltrate impossible ships and stage impossible rescues. Seal all sections. Find them. Use maximum force if necessary. Sir, maximum force could harm the tributes. Then use precision. But find them. Now. Throughout the ship, Krelvani warriors mobilized. They were the elite of the Empire, each one capable of conquering entire worlds. They'd never lost a battle, never failed a mission. They'd also never faced desperate human parents protecting their children. The boarding team and the rescued children were moving through the maintenance corridors when they heard the alert klaxons. Reeves checked her tactical display, watching as red dots began converging on their position. They're onto us. Kim, how's our exit strategy? Working on it, Chief. The virus is slowing them down, but these guys are adapting fast. Can we make it to the breach point? Not with the kids. Too far, too many hostiles. Reeves made a command decision. Collins, Kim, take the children and find somewhere defensible. I'll buy you time. Chief, that's an order. These kids are the mission. Everything else is secondary. She handed Sophie a small comm device. If you need to, press this button. Help will come. Then, she was gone, moving toward the approaching Krelvani forces with the fluid grace of a predator. Reeves had always been good at her job, but she'd never had stakes this personal before. Her own daughter was in that group of children, and she'd be damned if anyone was taking Emma again. The first Krelvani warrior rounded the corner and found himself facing something he'd never encountered before, a human parent with nothing left to lose. Reeves moved like smoke, staying inside the reach of his energy weapon. Her combat knife, a simple piece of sharpened steel that the aliens had dismissed as primitive, found the gaps in his armor with surgical precision. The warrior went down, his nervous system overloaded by strikes to pressure points that humans had mapped through millennia of warfare. His weapon clattered to the deck, and Reeves scooped it up without breaking stride. Two more warriors appeared, and she put the stolen weapon to use. The energy bolts were powerful enough to overload their own armor at close range, something the Krelvani had never considered. Who would be insane enough to engage them in close combat? Humans, apparently. Back in the detention block, Marcus had managed to break free a section of the metal bed. It wasn't much, a flat piece about the length of his forearm, but in trained hands, anything could be a weapon. He tested the edge. Not sharp, but with enough force behind it, wouldn't need to be. Dr. Vexhai chose that moment to return, eager to continue his experiments. He entered the cell confidently, secure in his natural advantages. The human was smaller, weaker, and now armed only with a piece of scrap metal. He never stood a chance. Marcus moved with an economy of motion born from decades of training. The makeshift weapon caught the scientist in what passed for his throat, disrupting the cluster of nerves there. As Vexhai collapsed, gasping, Marcus relieved him of his access badges and communication device. "Thanks for the lessons on pain tolerance," Marcus said quietly. "Let me return the favor." He left the scientist unconscious but alive. Despite everything, Marcus wasn't a killer by nature. He was a protector, and right now his daughter needed protecting. Using the stolen credentials, Marcus accessed the ship's computer. The interface was alien, but some things were universal. Security alerts showed multiple breaches, and internal communications were in chaos. Someone else was on the ship, and from the efficiency of their work, he had a good idea who. "Outstanding, boys," he murmured, recognizing special operations handiwork when he saw it. His teammates had come through, but they need help. Marcus pulled up the ship's schematics, his trained mind quickly identifying choke points and defensive positions. Then, he noticed something interesting. The ship's main power core was only 2 decks down from his current position, and, according to these readings, it was operating at near maximum capacity to maintain shields and weapons during the alert. A plan began to form. It was insane, suicidal even. But then, again, was attacking a galactic empire to rescue 47 children. Sometimes insane was exactly what you needed. "Should we destroy them, Ambassador?" his weapons officer asked. Zeleth considered. The human ship posed no real threat, but It might be useful to study their attempt at FDL technology. Disable their engines. We'll add their ship to our collection of primitive curiosities. It was another mistake. The Krelvani were about to learn that humans had spent their entire evolutionary history turning disadvantages into victories. They were persistence predators, problem solvers, and most importantly, parents who would do anything to protect their young. The Prometheus accelerated toward the massive alien flagship. To the Krelvani, it looked like an insect attacking a mountain. They didn't know that humans had a saying about that. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. And when it came to protecting their children, humans had more fight than the galaxy had ever seen. The Krelvani Empire's flagship had become a battlefield unlike any in its long history. In the maintenance corridors, Chief Diana Reeves had turned a simple intersection into a killing field. 7 Krelvani warriors lay unconscious or incapacitated around her, their advanced armor no match for human creativity and desperation. She was bleeding from a dozen wounds where energy weapons had grazed her, her stolen armor scorched and cracked. But she was still standing, still fighting, and still buying time for the children to escape. Her comm crackled with her team's voices. Chief, we're pinned down in Auxiliary Storage Bay 3. Kids are secure, but we got at least a dozen hostiles converging on our position. Reeve checked her stolen weapons power cell. Nearly depleted. She'd have to move soon anyway. Copy that. Hold position. Cavalry's coming. She didn't know if that was true, but sometimes hope was all you could offer. Meanwhile, Marcus Rodriguez was making his way toward the power core. The stolen scientist's credentials gave him access to areas most prisoners would never see. He moved with purpose, just another figure in the chaos. The Krelvani were so focused on the obvious threat that they didn't notice the human walking calmly through their midst. The power core chamber was exactly what he'd expected, a massive room dominated by some kind of contained reaction that hurt to look at directly. Energy coursed through conduits the size of subway tunnels, feeding the ship's massive systems. And it was running hot, straining to power shields, weapons, and engines simultaneously. Marcus studied the control panels. The script was alien, but mathematics was universal. Energy readings, flow rates, temperature gauges. The numbers told a story that any engineer could read. The system was robust, but not infinitely so. It had safety margins, redundancies, fail-safes. All he had to do was convince it that catastrophic failure was imminent. On Earth, they called it social engineering. Make the system work against itself. He began inputting commands, using the scientists' access codes to override safety protocols. Not to cause an explosion that would kill everyone, including the children. Instead, he programmed a cascading series of maintenance emergencies that would force the system to shut down and restart. The Krelvani would have power back in minutes, but for those few minutes, they'd be running on emergency backups only. No shields, no energy weapons, no force fields, just warriors with hand-to-hand weapons against humans who'd spent their entire evolution becoming very, very good at violence up close. In the auxiliary storage bay, Collins and Kim had turned storage containers into fortifications. The 47 human children huddled with the alien younglings, scared but remarkably calm under fire. Sophie Rodriguez had organized them into groups, keeping the younger ones in the center while the older kids helped watch the approaches. My dad would call this a target-rich environment, she told Emma Reeves, trying to sound braver than she felt. Emma, who'd inherited her mother's steel nerves, nodded. My mom says when you're outnumbered, make them come to you. Make them pay for every inch. The Krelvani warriors approached cautiously. They'd already lost too many soldiers to underestimate these humans. But they had numbers and firepower on their side. It was only a matter of time. Then, the lights went out. Emergency lighting cast the storage bay in deep red shadows. The hum of energy weapons powering down filled the sudden silence. Throughout the ship, force fields collapsed, doors defaulted to mechanical locks, and artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. What's happening? A Krelvani warrior's translator made his confusion clear. In the darkness, Technical Sergeant Kim smiled. That's what happens when you mess with a SEAL's kid. Collins switched to blades. It's about to get personal. The Krelvani had made another crucial error. They'd assumed their technological superiority made them unstoppable. But technology was just a tool, and when the tools failed, what remained was will, training, and the desperate fury of parents protecting their young. The battle in the storage bay would later be studied by military historians across the galaxy. Two human special operators, armed with nothing but combat knives and stolen close combat weapons, held off a dozen Krelvani warriors in near darkness. They used the fluctuating gravity to their advantage, pushing off walls and ceilings in movements that defied prediction. They turned the warriors' own strength against them, using leverage and physics to overcome the size difference. But it was the children who turned the tide. As the battle raged, Sophie noticed something. The emergency lights were on a separate circuit, still functioning. And they were hot, very hot. "Everyone, grab something reflective," she ordered. Mirrors, metal panels, anything shiny. The children scrambled to obey. Within moments, they'd gathered dozens of reflective surfaces from the storage containers. Sophie organized them into teams, each one angling their makeshift mirrors to concentrate the emergency light's heat on specific points. "Aim for their eyes," she called out. "They have 6 of them. Harder to protect." Suddenly, the Krelvani warriors found themselves fighting on 2 fronts. The human operators pressed their attack while being supported by 47 children wielding the galaxy's most primitive weapon, redirected light. Warriors who'd conquered worlds found themselves blinded and disoriented by human children who refused to be victims. On the bridge, Ambassador Zeleth watched his perfect, ordered world collapse into chaos. Emergency power had kicked in, but systems were failing cascade fashion throughout the ship. Internal communications were spotty at best, and the reports that did come through painted an impossible picture. "How many intruders are there?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir. Some reports say 3, others say dozens. They seem to be everywhere at once." "That's impossible. We're tracking 3 alien life signs and 1 escaped prisoner." His aide scales had paled to almost white. "Sir, what if there are only 4? What if 4 humans are doing all this?" The thought was absurd. 4 individuals against a ship of thousands? It couldn't be. But the evidence was mounting. Security footage, when it worked, showed the same few figures appearing in different locations. The chaos seemed too coordinated to be random, too effective to be luck. For humans had turned his flagship into a war zone. "Fine," Zeleth snarled. "If they want to die for their offspring, let them. Release the hunters." Several bridge officers exchanged worried looks. The hunters were the Empire's last resort, biological weapons bred for one purpose: to track and kill. They were kept in stasis during normal operations because they were nearly impossible to control once released. Using them on the ship was like using a flamethrower to kill an insect in your home. "Sir, with the force fields down, do it. We'll deal with the consequences later." In the storage bay, the battle had reached a stalemate. The Krelvani warriors had adapted to the children's mirror tactics, shielding their eyes while pressing forward. Kim was down, a deep gash in his leg preventing him from moving. Colin stood over him, blood streaming from his nose, still defiant. Then they heard it, a sound like nothing in their experience. Part growl, part metallic shriek. Something was coming, and even the Krelvani warriors looked nervous. "What is that?" Emma Reeves asked, her voice small for the first time. A Krelvani warrior, one of the younger ones, actually answered her. "Death. The hunters have been released. I'm sorry." That's when Chief Reeves arrived. She burst through the emergency access hatch like an avenging angel, still wearing the scorched remains of stolen armor, carrying enough stolen weapons to outfit a small army. But it was her expression that stopped everyone cold, the look of a mother who'd walked through hell and was prepared to go back for seconds. "Kids, grab weapons." "Collins, Kim, can you move?" "I'll damn well crawl if I have to," Kim growled. "Good, because we're leaving. Now, Chief." Collins pointed toward the sounds growing closer. "What about those things?" Reeves checked her weapons with professional efficiency. "I've got a date with them." "You got a date with extraction. Move." She handed Emma one of the smaller energy weapons. "You remember what I taught you at the range?" Emma nodded. trying to be as brave as her mother. Good girl. Protect the others. I'll be right behind you. It was a lie, and they both knew it. But sometimes lies were all you had. Marcus felt the ship shudder as he completed his sabotage of the power core. The restart sequence had begun, but he'd introduced enough errors to make it take far longer than it should. He allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before the scientist's communicator crackled with panicked reports. Hunters released. Section 7 compromised, children escaping. His blood ran cold. He knew about biological weapons from his time in Syria, had seen what desperation could drive people to unleash. If the Krelvani had something similar, he ran towards Section 7, no longer caring about stealth. His daughter was in danger. The first hunter emerged into the storage bay like a nightmare given form. It stood 3 meters tall, a perfect blend of biology and technology. Multiple limbs ended in claws that could tear through whole metal. Sensory organs covered its head, tracking heat, motion, even heartbeats. It had been bred for one purpose: to kill whatever it was pointed at. Chief Reeves stepped forward to meet it. That's close enough, ugly. The hunter tilted its head, analyzing her. One human female, already injured, minimal weapons. Not a threat. It started to move past her, toward the fleeing children. That was its last mistake. Reeves had saved one special weapon, something she'd been carrying since the mission began. A prototype the tech boys had cooked up based on their analysis of Krelvani biology. It fired a concentrated burst of sonic energy at a very specific frequency, the resonance point of the crystalline structures in Krelvani neural tissue. The hunter screamed as its enhanced nervous system overloaded. It thrashed wildly, its claws leaving deep gouges in the deck plating. But Reeves kept the weapon trained on it, pouring every ounce of power into that focused beam of sound. The hunter fell, twitching, but 2 more were already entering the bay. I can do this all day, Reeves muttered, though she knew the weapon only had power for 1 more shot. Maybe. That's when Marcus Rodriguez entered the bay from the opposite direction. He took in the scene in an instant. His daughter's retreating form, the special operators shepherding the children to safety, and Diana Reeves standing alone against monsters. He didn't hesitate. The makeshift weapon he'd fashioned from the bed frame wasn't much against creatures designed to be perfect killers. But Marcus had something they didn't: the ability to accept his own death if it meant his daughter lived. He charged the second hunter from behind, driving the metal shard deep into what he hoped was a vital spot. The creature spun with inhuman speed, backhanding him across the bay. Marcus felt ribs crack as he hit the wall, tasted blood in his mouth. But he'd given Reeves the opening she needed. Her second sonic burst caught the wounded hunter in its moment of distraction. It went down hard, internal systems fried. The third hunter was smarter. It had observed its packmates' deaths and adapted. When Reeves tried to target it, the creature moved with blinding speed, knocking the weapon from her hands. Its claws raked across her chest, shredding armor and flesh alike. She went down, but even as she fell, she was reaching for another weapon. Because that's what humans did. They fought until they couldn't, and then they fought some more. The hunter loomed over her, ready to deliver the killing blow. Then a small voice spoke from behind it. "Hey, ugly, over here." Sophie Rodriguez stood in the doorway, holding one of the reflective panels the children had used. But now it wasn't reflecting light. She'd turned it into a makeshift shield, and behind her, the other children were ready. "No!" Marcus roared, forcing himself to his feet despite the pain. The hunter turned toward easier prey. It took 1 step toward the children. That's when the lights came back on. Full power restored throughout the ship as Marcus's sabotage finally cleared. But he'd done his job too well. The power core, stressed beyond its limits, was running at 150% capacity. Every system on the ship was suddenly overcharged, including the one Sophie had been counting on. "Now," she screamed. 47 children raised their mirrors in perfect unison, catching and focusing the suddenly intense lighting directly into the hunter's sensory organs. The creature, designed to track in near darkness, was completely overwhelmed by the assault of pure, concentrated light. It stumbled, disoriented, clawing at its eyes. That's when a Vraxian youngling stepped forward. Despite being from another world, despite having every reason to flee, it stood with the human children. For our protectors, it called out in its clicking language. And suddenly, the alien children were joining the fight, using their own unique abilities. Some had natural electrical discharges, others could spit acidic compounds, and one species could generate ultrasonic screams. The hunter, designed to be the perfect predator, found itself facing something unprecedented. Children of multiple species working together, refusing to be prey. Marcus and Reeves hit it from opposite sides while it was distracted. Two wounded human parents, fighting with nothing but determination and improvised weapons. The hunter was stronger, faster, and designed to kill. But it had never faced opponents who simply refused to stop. Marcus drove his metal shard deep into the creature's leg joint, hampering its movement. Reeves, blood streaming from her wounds, managed to loop a maintenance cable around its throat. Together, they brought the monster down, using leverage and teamwork to overcome raw power. The hunter thrashed once, twice, then lay still. In a sudden silence, Sophie ran to her father. "Daddy!" Marcus caught her, holding her tight despite the pain in his ribs. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." Around them, the other children found their rescuers. Emma Reeves supported her mother, while the woman tried to pretend she wasn't about to collapse. Collins and Kim, both wounded but mobile, were already checking the children for injuries. "We need to move," Collins said. "This won't be over." He was right. Throughout the ship, Kralvani warriors were responding to the power restoration. The Prometheus was still out there, waiting for their signal. They'd rescue the children, but now they had to escape an entire warship. "I have an idea," Sophie said, "but you're not going to like it." Marcus looked at his daughter, saw the same determination that had gotten him through Hell Week. "Let's hear it, sweetheart." As Sophie outlined her plan, using the ship's own systems against it, Marcus felt a surge of pride. The Kralvani had taken a Navy SEAL's daughter. They'd had no idea what forces they were setting in motion. On the bridge, Ambassador Zeleth received the reports with growing disbelief. 3 hunters dead, multiple warriors incapacitated. The tribute children not just escaped, but actively fighting back. And it had all been accomplished by 4 humans, from members of a species they dismissed as primitive. "Sir," his aide reported, "we're detecting massive power fluctuations throughout the ship. If we don't stabilize the course soon." "I know," Zeleth snarled. He looked out at the stars, at the vast empire he served. For the first time in his long life, he wondered if they'd finally pushed too far, taken from the wrong species. "Sir, what are your orders?" Zeleth was about to respond when every screen on the bridge lit up with the same message, displayed in perfect Kralvani script. "You took our children. Now face the consequences." Humanity, the power core of fluctuations suddenly made sense. The humans weren't trying to escape. They were turning the entire ship into a weapon. "All hands, abandon ship," Zeleth ordered. But even as he spoke, he knew it was too late. The humans had learned their technology, turned their own systems against them. And somewhere in the bowels of his dying ship, for human parents were teaching the galaxy a lesson that would echo for generations. Never touch our kids. Sophie Rodriguez's plan was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. She stood before the assembled group of children and wounded warriors, holding the stolen Kralvani datapad like a seasoned tactician presenting a battle strategy. "The ship's power core is overloading," she explained, her young voice steady. "My dad's sabotage worked too well. But instead of trying to stop it, we're going to make it worse." The Kralvani built their ship with something called distributed processing. Every system talks to every other system. Technical Sergeant Kim, despite his wounds, was following along. A networked architecture. So, I've been watching their systems while we were imprisoned. When one part gets overloaded, it shares the load with others. But what if every system was overloaded at once? Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he understood what his daughter was proposing. A cascade failure. The entire ship becomes one giant bomb. "Not a bomb," Sophie corrected. "We don't want to blow up. But if we overload their faster-than-light drive at the same time as everything else, we could create an uncontrolled jump. Kim finished, his eyes widening. The ship would be thrown across the galaxy, maybe further. Chief Reeves leaned heavily against a bulkhead, her wounds finally catching up to her. And us? What happens to us? Sophie's expression faltered for just a moment before her determination returned. The Prometheus is still out there. If we can signal them right before the jump, they can track our quantum signature. Maybe. It was a desperate plan with a dozen ways to fail. But it was better than waiting for the entire Krelvani fleet to arrive. All right, Marcus said. What do you need? Sophie held up the datapad. Access to 3 primary systems: environmental controls, navigation, and communications. We need to hit them all at once. I'll take environmental, Collins volunteered. Kim, you think you can handle navigation with that leg? I'll crawl if I have to. That leaves communications for me, Reeves said. Mom, you can barely stand, Emma protested. Then you'll help me, just like we practiced at home, remember? You're my spotter. Marcus looked at his daughter. And you'll coordinate from here? Sophie nodded, then looked at the other children. Everyone else, we need you to be ready. When I give the signal, we run for the escape pods. The Krelvani ones won't work for us, but the emergency beacons will. The Prometheus will find us. What if they don't? A young boy asked. Sophie met his eyes with a confidence beyond her years. They will. Our parents don't give up. Ever. As the teams dispersed to their objectives, the Vraxian youngling approached Sophie. Your species is very strange, it said through its translator. Most would accept defeat. You turned defeat into victory. My dad taught me something, Sophie replied. Humans don't win because we're the strongest or the smartest. We win because we're too stubborn to lose. Throughout the ship, alarms began wailing as systems detected the growing instabilities. Krelvani crew members rushed to emergency stations, trying to contain the cascade of failures. But they were fighting a losing battle against their own technology, sabotaged by a 7-year-old who'd spent her captivity learning their systems. Collins reached environmental control first. The Krelvani technician manning the station never saw him coming. One precise strike, and the alien was unconscious. Collins began inputting commands, pushing the life support systems to maximum output. Oxygen production, heating, cooling, air circulation, all running at levels that would burn out the generators in minutes. Kim dragged himself into the navigation center, leaving a trail of blood behind him. 2 Krelvani officers turned to face him, but Kim had one advantage. He no longer cared about his own survival. He threw himself at the nearest officer, grappling for the alien's weapon. The fight was brutal and short. Kim might have been wounded, but he'd been trained by the best. When it was over, both aliens were down, and Kim was at the navigation console. His fingers flew over the controls, implementing Sophie's instructions. The FTL drive began spinning up without proper calculations, building energy without direction. Navigation computers screamed warnings as Kim overrode every safety protocol. Reeves and Emma faced the longest journey. Communications was in the command section, crawling with Krelvani warriors on high alert. But Reeves had spent her career making the impossible possible. Stay low, move fast, and remember violence of action, she whispered to her daughter. They moved through the corridors like ghosts, using maintenance passages and ventilation shafts. When they encountered patrols, Reeves struck from the shadows while Emma provided distractions. It shouldn't have worked. A wounded woman and a child against the Empire's finest warriors. But the Krelvani had never faced humans protecting their young. On the bridge, Ambassador Zeleth watched his Empire's reputation crumble in real time. Reports flooded in from across the ship. Multiple system failures, coordinated sabotage, and somehow impossibly the primitive humans were winning. Sir, the FTL drive is spinning up without coordinates. If it activates, I know what happens, Zeleth snapped. Override it. I can't. Someone's physically destroyed the safety interlocks. We'd have to manually shut down the entire power grid. Then do it. Sir, without power, we'll lose life support, artificial gravity, everything. The crew. Zeleth's 6 eyes closed in defeat. He'd been outmaneuvered by children and their parents. The mighty Krelvani Empire, brought low by 4 humans who refused to accept the natural order of things. Begin evacuation procedures, he ordered quietly. All hands to escape pods. In the holding area, Sophie monitored the cascading failures through her stolen pad. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Too well, actually. The power core's overload was accelerating faster than her calculations had predicted. "We need to move," she announced. "Everyone to the escape pod bay." The children moved as a unit, human and alien together. They'd been through too much to leave anyone behind now. Marcus scooped up the smaller ones, ignoring the screaming pain from his ribs. Sophie led the way, her fingers dancing over the pad as she made constant adjustments to keep the ship from exploding too soon. They reached the escape pod bay just as Reeves and Emma arrived from the other direction. The chief was barely conscious, leaning heavily on her daughter, but she completed her mission. The communication systems were flooding every frequency with automated distress calls, creating a beacon the Prometheus couldn't miss. "Collins and Kim?" Marcus asked. "Right behind us," Reeves gasped. "I think." The escape pods were designed for Krelvani physiology, but they'd work for anyone. The children began piling in, Sophie making sure each pod had a mix of species in case some had different environmental needs. Collins arrived, carrying Kim in a fireman's carry. Both men were bloodied but alive. "Navigation's locked in," Kim reported weakly. "That jump drive is going to throw this ship into the next galaxy." "Good," Marcus said. "Get in the pods." That's when they heard it. The sound of dozens of Krelvani warriors approaching. The evacuation order had driven the crew toward the same escape pods. "Take the children and go," Marcus ordered. "I'll hold them." "Like hell," Reeves growled, checking her last weapon. "We all go or no one goes." "There's no time, Dad." Sophie's voice cut through the argument. She held up the pad one last time. "I have a better idea." Her fingers moved across the screen with practiced ease. Throughout the ship, emergency bulkheads began slamming shut. Not randomly, but in a precise pattern that turned the corridors into a maze. The approaching Krelvani found their direct route cut off, forced to backtrack through sections that Sophie flooded with coolant or deprived of atmosphere. "Estimated time to arrival, 6 minutes," she announced. "We'll be gone in 2. The humans and alien children packed into the escape pods with seconds to spare. Marcus made sure Sophie was secure before climbing in himself. As the pod door sealed, he caught one last glimpse of the Krelvani flagship's interior, a monument to imperial power brought low by human determination. Launching in 10 seconds, the pod's automated system announced. Sophie pressed close to her father. "Did we win?" Marcus thought about the question. They'd rescued the children, crippled an Empire's flagship, and sent a message to the galaxy. But at what cost? "We survived," he said finally. Sometimes that's the biggest victory of all. The escape pods launched like a swarm of metal seeds, scattering in all directions. Behind them, the Krelvani flagship shuddered as critical systems passed the point of no return. The FTL drive, spinning without proper coordinates or safety protocols, began tearing holes in space-time itself. On the Prometheus, Captain Park watched her sensors light up like a Christmas tree. Multiple launches detected. "I'm reading 47 pods with human life signs, plus unknowns." The boarding team? 4 additional human signatures spread across 3 pods. They did it. They actually did it. "Begin recovery operations. And get us clear of that ship. Something's happening to their FTL drive." The Prometheus moved with surprising grace for such a hodgepodge vessel, scooping up escape pods with mechanical arms originally designed for asteroid mining. Each pod brought celebration as children were reunited with the skeleton crew left aboard. Marcus was in the 3rd pod recovered. He emerged carrying 2 smaller children, his daughter right behind him, helping a Vraxian youngling who'd become her friend. The reunion was everything he'd imagined: tears, joy, and the overwhelming relief of holding his child safe again. "Daddy, look." Sophie pointed at the view screen. The Krelvani flagship was dancing. There was no other word for it. The massive vessel flickered in and out of reality as its FTL drive fought against the laws of physics. Lightning made of twisted space crawled across its hull. Then, with a flash that temporarily blinded the sensors, it was gone. "Where did it go?" someone asked. "Everywhere," Kim answered from his stretcher. "That uncontrolled jump scattered its atoms across about 50 light-years. Maybe more." Captain Park studied her readings. "I'm detecting quantum signatures spreading in all directions. If any of the crew survived in those pods, they're going to have a long trip home," Marcus finished. "Without their flagship, without their tribute, and with a story about how 4 humans turned their own technology against them." The Prometheus began its journey back to Earth, carrying 47 children and a message that would reshape the galaxy. The Krelvani Empire had ruled through fear for 10,000 years. They'd never faced a species that turned fear into fury, desperation into determination. In her father's arms, Sophie Rodriguez fell asleep for the first time in days. She'd done the impossible, saved not just human children, but alien younglings too. The galaxy would remember this day not as humanity's first defeat, but as the moment they announced themselves as protectors of the innocent. Word spread faster than light through quantum communication networks. The mighty Krelvani, humbled by a species that had barely achieved spaceflight. The story grew with each telling, but the core remained the same. They took a Navy SEAL's child. They took humanity's children. And humanity took their flagship apart from the inside. On a dozen worlds, species that had lived in fear of the Empire for generations heard the tale. They learned that the Krelvani could be beaten, that their technology could be turned against them, that sometimes the smallest fighters had the biggest hearts. Rebellions started as whispers in dark corners. Why should they give up their children? If humans could fight back, why couldn't they? Ambassador Zeleth survived the destruction of his ship, rescued from a failing escape pod by a patrol vessel. He stood before the Imperial Council, delivering his report with the shame of utter defeat. 4 humans, the High Chancellor repeated. 4 humans destroyed our newest flagship? Yes, Excellency. They were unprecedented. They turned our own systems against us, fought without regard for their own survival, and their offspring actively participated in the sabotage. Impossible. Children cannot be warriors. Human children can, apparently. The smallest one, no more than 7 cycles, orchestrated the cascade failure that destroyed the ship. The Council fell silent, processing this impossibility. Finally, the High Chancellor spoke again. "Issue new orders to all vessels. Earth is to be quarantined. No ship is to approach their system under any circumstances." "But, sir, they're a primitive species. Surely a proper fleet could what? Defeat them? Perhaps. But at what cost? We've ruled through the certainty of our power. That certainty is now broken. If we attack Earth and fail, the Empire falls. If we attack and succeed but take heavy losses, the Empire falls. Our best option is to pretend this never happened. And if they come for us..." The High Chancellor's scales shifted to show an emotion rarely seen in their species, fear. "Then, we hope they remember that we returned their children. And we pray their mercy is greater than our arrogance." The Prometheus docked at Earth's newest orbital station to a hero's welcome. The story had preceded them, transmitted by quantum communicator the moment they were in range. Humanity's first contact with the Galactic Empire had been a declaration of war against their children. Humanity had responded in the only way they knew how, with ingenuity, determination, and a refusal to accept defeat. Marcus Rodriguez walked down the ramp with Sophie on his shoulders, her small hands gripping his hair as she waved to the crowds. Behind them, the other children emerged with their rescuers. Chief Reeves, supported by her daughter, but standing tall. Collins and Kim, battered but unbroken, for humans who'd done the impossible. The crowd erupted in celebration, but Marcus is trained. I caught the military officers already planning. Earth had won this battle by surprise and desperation. Next time, they'd be ready. Ships were already being designed based on what they'd learned. Weapons developed. Strategies planned. Because the galaxy had learned something about humanity today. They protected their own. They turned weakness into strength. And they never, ever gave up. The Vraxian youngling, standing with its newly arrived parent unit, pointed at Sophie. That one, it said in its clicking language. She saved us all. The small human with a brilliant mind. Its parent unit's scales shifted in disbelief. A human child defeated the Krelvani? Not defeated, the youngling corrected. Taught them. Taught us all. The humans don't conquer. They protect. As the families dispersed, heading home to heal and